He thought staying civil would protect him, that if he stayed calm, kept things respectful, and didn't push too hard, the divorce would end peacefully and fairly. No drawn-out courtroom drama, no ugly accusations, just two adults parting ways with dignity. But what he didn't realize was that civility without strategy is one of the fastest ways to lose everything. Not all at once, not with a fight, but piece by piece, through quiet agreements, missed opportunities, and 1,000 moments where he chose peace over power. Family court doesn't reward good behavior. It doesn't hand out medals for being cooperative. It enforces what's written. And when you're too focused on keeping the temperature down, you stop noticing that the other side is turning up the pressure behind your back. You don't ask for a full financial breakdown. You agree to early settlements just to avoid conflict. You let a lawyer lead the process and call that being mature. But once the paperwork is signed, it's done. The civility you thought would earn you grace just locked you into obligations you never meant to take on. The money's gone. The leverage is gone. And the worst part? Everyone still thinks it ended on good terms, except you. So before you decide to be agreeable for the sake of peace, ask yourself, are you protecting the situation or surrendering your future without even realizing it? At first, staying civil feels like the smart move. You don't want things to spiral, you don't want drama, and you definitely don't want to become one of those horror stories about messy divorces. So you keep things light, nod along in meetings, and avoid pushing back when things get uncomfortable. But here's where the trap begins, because in the legal world, civility often gets mistaken for compliance. And if you're not speaking up, the court assumes you're signing off. Judges don't read minds. They read silence as agreement and politeness as acceptance. If your ex or her lawyer proposes something slightly one-sided and you don't object, maybe because you're tired or just trying to be the bigger person, the system locks it in as consensus. You think you're being cooperative. The court sees a man who didn't resist, and that lack of resistance becomes the foundation for the final deal. And the worst part? You don't even notice it happening, because no one tells you that your calm demeanor is quietly turning into legal consent. By the time you realize the terms aren't fair, maybe she gets more equity or more time with the kids, it's already too late to claim you were just trying to keep the peace. Civility, when not paired with clear boundaries, becomes the silent language of surrender. There's a moment in every divorce when the other side makes an offer, and it almost always comes too early. Maybe it sounds reasonable. Maybe it even feels like a relief. You're tired, drained, and the thought of dragging this out feels worse than just accepting what's on the table. So you take it, not because it's fair, but because you want it to be over. But here's what you didn't realize. That was your leverage, and you just gave it away. Divorce negotiations are like chess. The first move is never the real offer. It's a test. If you accept early, especially without full financial disclosure, you're giving away your biggest advantage, the ability to push for more. Once you say yes, the system assumes you're satisfied. Your ex's legal team knows this. They expect you to flinch first, especially if you're trying to be civil. And once you've agreed to that initial deal, even if it's lopsided, it becomes the new starting point. From there, it only moves further away from what you actually deserve. You think you're avoiding conflict, but what you're really doing is closing the door on deeper conversations about assets, income, or long-term obligations. And once the door's closed, no one's going to reopen it just because you suddenly change your mind. Civility without resistance doesn't get you peace. It gets you a premature settlement that favors everyone but you, while you're trying to be the reasonable one. Keeping things calm, hoping for a mutual agreement. Something else is happening behind the scenes. She's lawyering up. Her attorney is mapping out strategies, gathering financial records, setting deadlines, and preparing to go after every advantage the law allows. Meanwhile, you're still sitting in silence, trusting that being polite will be enough. And that's the exact moment the imbalance begins. This is what most men don't realize. While you're staying civil, she's getting organized. While you're assuming things will work themselves out, her legal team is positioning her as the stable parent, the financially dependent spouse, or the one who just wants what's fair. And the court starts to absorb that narrative because it's the only one being told. Your silence doesn't protect you. It just creates space for her side to dominate the conversation. And by the time you realize it's not mutual, that this isn't going to be a fair and friendly resolution, you're already behind. Evidence has been submitted. Schedules have been proposed. A version of the story is already being written, and you haven't even picked up the pen. Staying civil isn't a problem. It's standing still while the other side is making moves. Because once they're 3 steps ahead, you'll spend the rest of the case trying to catch up and paying the price for waiting too long to act. There comes a moment when you finally agree to something just to move things forward. Maybe it's a custody schedule, a property split, or a support amount that doesn't feel quite right. But you tell yourself it's good enough. You just want closure. You want to stop the bleeding. So you settle, thinking you can adjust it later if needed. But here's what no one tells you. Once the court sees your agreement as fair and civil, it becomes locked in. Judges love clean deals. If both parties signed willingly, without major objections, the court assumes everything is balanced. You might think, I was just being cooperative. But on paper, you look like someone who reviewed the terms and said yes. And if you try to come back months later saying it wasn't fair, the court won't see that as unfair. They'll see it as regret. And regret doesn't change a thing. What makes it worse is that agreements reached without pushback carry weight. Judges often use them as a reference for future decisions, especially if kids are involved. That means your early compromises, not fought, not questioned, become your legal baseline. It doesn't matter that you were trying to keep the peace. The court sees finality, stability, a done deal. You thought you were being fair. The system thought you were finished. And the second that gap closes, your ability to revise, renegotiate, or reclaim what you gave up is gone. Sometimes, being the good guy feels like the right move. You want to be the one who doesn't escalate, who doesn't drag her through the mud, who shows grace when everything's falling apart. So you let her keep the house. You walk away from retirement savings. You don't contest her support requests. Not because you don't care, but because you just want out with your dignity intact. But what you don't see in that moment is this. You're not protecting her feelings. You're sacrificing your future. You tell yourself you'll recover. You'll rebuild. That money isn't worth the fight. But what you're really doing is signing away assets you spent years building. Assets she'll now use to stabilize her next chapter while you're left starting over with less. Courts don't ask why you agreed to it. They don't reward you for taking the high road. They just enforce what you signed. And when it's time to move on, you'll realize she's already settled into a new life, funded by the one you built. The emotional relief of being civil doesn't last. But the financial cost of being passive does. Giving up too much doesn't just affect your bank account. It slows down your entire ability to rebuild. And years from now, when you're still trying to catch up, no one will remember that you were the one who tried to keep things respectful. They'll only see the deal you agreed to and how little is left for you. There's a subtle shift that happens when you choose to stay quiet. At first, it feels like maturity, like you're taking the high road. You avoid arguments, you let little things slide, and you hope the court sees you as the reasonable one. But here's what really happens. You teach the system to expect less from you. Not just financially, but as a father, as a negotiator, as someone with skin in the game. Family court pays attention to patterns. If you consistently defer, don't challenge, don't assert your role, you get labeled. Not officially, but emotionally, legally, and psychologically. You become the one who compromises, the one who lets the other parent lead, the one who will pay without question, show up without complaint, and accept whatever's handed down. It's a quiet framing, but it sticks and it bleeds into everything. You think you're avoiding conflict, but what you're really doing is showing the court that you won't push back, that you'll accept being sidelined if it means avoiding a scene. And that mindset doesn't just affect property or support. It shows up in custody, parenting plans, and how much influence you're seen to have. Civil isn't a problem. Passive is. Because when you stop showing up with a clear voice, the system stops listening for one. Civility feels noble in the middle of chaos. It feels like strength, like you're the one keeping things grounded while everything else falls apart. But when it comes to divorce, civility without strategy is a setup. You're not just trying to survive the process, you're shaping the life that comes after. And if you give up your leverage now, thinking peace will follow, what you'll get instead is a settlement that bleeds you slowly with no way back. No one's going to step in later and fix the deal you were too polite to question. The court won't hand you more time with your kids or return the assets you walked away from. They'll look at the agreement, see your signature, and call it final. Because in the legal system, cooperation without clarity looks like consent. And the longer you stay quiet in the name of keeping things civil, the more power you quietly surrender. So if you want peace, earn it without losing your footing. Be respectful, but be firm. Ask the hard questions. Push for what's fair, not just what's easy. Because in divorce, dignity isn't measured by how calm you stayed. It's measured by what you were able to hold on to once it was all over.